Okay, good morning all and welcome to this meeting of the Swansea Bay City Deal Joint Committee on 17th of December 2024. I'll start with apologies for absence first, please.
Yeah, from Elwyn Evans, Chair.
Okay, are there any other apologies anybody wishes to give today? If not, we'll record those. We'll move on then to the minutes of the previous meeting from the 5th of November. I've not been asked for any amendments, but if there are any, I'm happy to take them this morning. If not, could I look to colleagues to approve the minutes, please? If you could show. Thank you very much. Those are agreed.
Sorry, Chair, you missed interest.
Yeah, just coming to that. Apologies, skipped an item. So we'll take now expressions of interest. Any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interest. If anybody has any, if they could declare them now, please. Yeah, don't see any declarations there, so we'll take them as none. In terms of announcements of the Chair, I don't have any specific announcements for today's meeting. In terms of public question time, can I just check, have we received any questions from members of the public that we need to consider today?
None, Chair, no.
Okay, thank you. We'll go then to our first main item, which is the co-opted membership. And I'll go to Debbie Smith to take us through this item, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks the Joint Committee approval for the co-option of Jan Williams as a replacement member for Swansea Bay University Health Board onto the Joint Committee. Jan is unable to attend today, but I would ask the Joint Committee to deal with this in her absence. So can I ask, please, for someone to move this report and for a seconder?
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. I'm more than happy to move. Could I look for a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks, John. Okay, so we know we gave our thanks to Emma as the outgoing chair of the Health Board. Jan is her replacement. I know Jan is keen to join the board. So again, can I ask you all if you're in support of the recommendation? Thank you very much. That is agreed. We'll move then to item 7, which is the audit terms of reference for internal audit. And I'll come to Charlotte to take us through this item, please. Charlotte.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. My name is Charlotte Hodges and I'm the lead principal auditor for Pembrokeshire County Council. The report presented outlines the terms of reference that I will be asking the Joint Committee to approve to allow the annual internal audit review of Swansea Bay City Deal for 24-25 to be undertaken. The terms of reference details the areas the internal audit review will focus on, which are separately listed within section 2. The broad areas that we will review includes the governance, project management and monitoring, internal control, financial and risk management arrangements in place. The work programme has been prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards and has been developed in consultation with the Swansea Bay City Deal Section 151 Officer, Monitoring Officer and Portfolio Director prior to submission to the Joint Committee for approval today. I anticipate the fieldwork will begin early 2025 and will be completed by the end of March 2025. We will follow our normal reporting procedures, allowing the draft report to be considered by officers before the final report is presented to the Joint Committee. I would therefore like to request that the Joint Committee approves the proposed 2024-25 internal audit terms of reference. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Charlotte. Very happy to formally move the report on your behalf and thank you for the report. Are there any, could I ask for a seconder first, please? Yeah, thank you, Darren. Appreciate it. Okay, are there any questions or comments for Charlotte before we move to the vote? If not, could I ask colleagues then if they show if they're in favour of the report, please? Thank you very much. That is carried and agreed. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you.
We'll move then to item 8, which is the Joint Committee Forward Work Plan. I'll come to John Burns for this item. John.
Thank you, Chair. So the committee should be familiar that this is a 6-monthly update. We're providing a Joint Committee Forward Work Plan. So there's an Appendix A summarising all the activity. It basically covers between 6 and 12 months of forward-looking information. People like Sam attending the meeting, covering off skills and talent, and others are part of that. But in their main headings, governance, communication, engagement, legal and finance are covered off on the activities over that 12-month period, Chair. And as far as we've engaged with various stakeholders to populate those, but it's a rolling kind of progress. So if anybody wants to input to that throughout the year, they're more than happy to. But we are looking for approval today, Chair.
Thank you, John. Yeah, as you say, it's a live document which will continue to be updated. So thank you again for this. I'm happy to formally move it. Could I ask somebody for a seconder, please? Thank you, John. Any questions for John Burns on the forward work programme? All happy to accept, if you could show. Thank you very much, colleagues. That is agreed. On then to the series of programme updates that we are taking. This one on Skills and Talent programme. I welcome Sam Cutland to present this one for us, please, Sam.
Thanks, Chair. If you just bear with me while I fiddle with my screen share.
Okay. Yep, that's showing. Thank you, Sam.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. It's been a little bit slow in testing as I'm moving through the slides, so bear with me. There we go. So if we cover off the primary aims, I'll whip through this really quickly so that we can get to any questions for you. So primarily, Skills and Talent programme is there to support the other 8 City Deal projects, particularly around their community benefits. But our specific outputs include directly delivering at least 2,200 additional skills within the region, supporting the development of around 14,000 individuals with higher level skills within 10 years, to create at least 3,000 new apprenticeship opportunities, deliver 20 new updated course frameworks, ensuring that we meet industry need and we really are employer-led on all of our activity, and to create a clear pathway for our young people from school education through FE, HE, across the 5 key sector areas, as well as creating 2 centres of excellence. We've been working really hard. We're moving forward. We're really at a sort of crescendo at the moment. It's absolutely crazy. But one of the primary focuses for us is the Skills Barometer, which has been created. Now, the Skills Barometer looks at the City Deal job creation, what those specific job roles are or may be, and ensuring that there's a clear pathway and there are vocational training opportunities in order to meet those needs regionally. It's a very live document, is constantly updated as we get more information from sector, as we get more information around what current training provision is across the region, and we're constantly mapping that across to make sure needs are met. We've got 22 full pilot projects now in delivery. They've gone through the approvals process. Some of them are coming to project closure stage now, which is quite exciting. We've got 6 new apprenticeship routes that have been developed or are in the process of being developed. Some of them are in delivery and they've been taken up not just within our region, they've now bled out to other areas in Wales as well. There's constantly ongoing discussions around future skill pilot projects, as well as, you know, it's meeting several demand areas from industry, really. We're looking at their recruitment needs, where are their recruitment challenges, what can we do to assist them around that, as well as looking at the skills gap need, whereby maybe we haven't got the skills within the region, we haven't got the training provision in the region, or potentially we haven't got the courses created anywhere, in which case we need to write those and get them into delivery through our partners. There's a number of concept areas for centres of excellence been identified. These centres of excellence are not, we have no capital spend, we're not building buildings, but it's about amalgamation of activity around a key sector in a key local authority area. So this is basically our sort of governance structure and also how we're achieving our outputs. So as you can see at the top line there, we've got all our industry cluster groups. That's across all the key sectors, as well as key representation from all the training providers within the region. They feed into Skills Solution Group, which feeds into our SP board, and it helps to assist us with those key output areas as outlined at the bottom there. I'll go into more detail with those in a sec. So in terms of where we are and where we need to be, our target of 14,000 higher skilled individuals. Currently, with the approved projects, we're looking at 3,217, and that's everything from level 2 right the way up to degree level. With increased skills, as you see that target, we've completely smashed it. But that was key. That was really important. I think when our business case was written, we didn't realise the amount of awareness raising that needed to happen within the region to make sure that parents, teachers, industry, the man on the street, and our current workforce were aware of these opportunities and these new exciting roles that would become available. Apprenticeships, as you'll see, those figures are quite low compared to the £3,000 target of apprenticeship recruitment. I'm sure we'll have some questions about that later on. I'm happy to answer. Courses created, again, we've exceeded targets. We're on 32 at the moment, although that's creeping up as well. Again, that just speaks volumes about the amount of work that's going into working with partners and industry to ensure that industry needs are being met with the content available within the region. Again, the centres of excellence, that's going to be an amalgamation, so those will not be checked off until closer to the end of spend. In terms of finances, we've committed around about 3 million at the moment out of our £8 million pot. This has generated or secured investment, public investment of circa 1.5. Again, private investment, 1.5. Part of our investment figure was around the apprenticeship wages as well, which is again close to 1.5. So in terms of private investment, we've managed to secure 3 million thus far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sam, and thanks for that. As you say, some really good numbers in there. Yeah, just in terms of the point you made on apprentices, is there something further you wanted to say about the challenges around that?
It has been, our business case was written in 2017 and finally signed off in 21. And there have been a number of changes that have really impacted our ability to achieve that thus far. So predominantly the 3,000 figure was taken from the other 8 city deal business cases, whereby there were specific apprenticeship recruitment targets within their community benefits. Those updates to the business cases for the other 8 have now happened, and the target figures have been removed. But we are still keeping our legacy figure, and we plan to achieve that. So that's the one. That means that it's maybe not as much of a priority for the other 8 city deal projects as it might have been previously. Outside of the city deal, Welsh Government have reduced apprenticeship funding in general, which obviously means you're not going to have as many sign-ups. And second to that, they've also prioritised higher level apprenticeships. There's been more degree apprenticeships rolled out, which obviously cost per learner is considerably higher, which comes out of the same budget. So what we've seen regionally is since 2017 to now, a considerable apprenticeship start or apprenticeship recruitment drop, which obviously gives us a number of challenges, but we're keen to work towards that 3,000 and believe it is achievable. So in terms of mitigations, we have, as I've outlined, created 6 new apprenticeship routes meeting industry need within the region, which obviously will hopefully meet employer need and make sure that employers are utilising the apprenticeship as it suits their purposes. We're also in the process of working, well, I was hoping to have a better update for you, but we've got a board meeting in January, an extraordinary meeting to review maybe a different approach to how we support employers within the region to recruit their apprenticeship figure, to increase their apprenticeship figures and increase that engagement that we're hoping will help us to achieve that, not within the 10 years. I'd like to see that achieved before end of spend in 28.
Okay, thank you, Sam. That's really helpful. And again, we do note there have been some challenges over the period you're referring to and some changes. So it is important that we reflect on that. Some great progress in the other areas, though, and I think we should acknowledge that. Again, just a reference, I was on a call with the other leaders yesterday with the Minister, and she emphasised how important the skills provision would be in terms of not just meeting the aims of the city deal and being able to make sure that we grow our own skills and talent within the region and don't have to suck in additional skills from outside, but also to make sure that we're able to meet the aims of things like the Celtic Freeport ambitions and others. So very, very important, and one the Minister was specifically interested in. So good to see the work on that. I'll bring Councillor Hunt in now. I think Steve's got a question. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. It's on the apprentices as well. I think I asked this 2 years ago as well, Sam, to be honest with you. I just sometimes, I agree with what Rob has said on everything else. I think excellent work and progress has been made. So apprentices, I just wondered, trying to understand the drive, obviously working with partners and others, the joined up approach, I suppose. Then, I mean, I mentioned GCRE last time, which is actually in my own ward up there in the rail industry. We're talking about the free ports now. I mean, there are organisations like Lanzatech down here, and I'm sure other leaders will have identify their own areas. I just wondered how in sync it is for conversations to drive that, because at the end of the day, you can't have an apprenticeship for the sake of an apprenticeship. There's going to be a job at the end of that apprenticeship. So you've got to train people in skills that the jobs are there. Because I as a leader, and I'm going to say, Rob, I think this is our first meeting for our new chief executive. So perhaps you might want to introduce her to some of the partners after I finish now. But I think that it's really critical and important to identify what the skill sets that are out there and perhaps drive it ourselves with partners to where those jobs are, because I mean, I know Paul is on the call from the universities, the academic side of things, apprenticeships, we know where they go, and they probably got that balance of where they get that education come out into a job. But I think it's more difficult then, shall I say, in apprentices of the stature that we are looking for. But they are there. These jobs are exciting times in East Port Talbot, I have to say, with the free ports and potential Fromis. But they're not immediate, are they? We have gone through the Tata Steel, and are going through, not gone through, we're going through the Tata Steel, where we're trying to upskill and give those. So apprentices are not aimed at an age group. They can be adults, can't they? Learning
Absolutely.
new skills. So I think all of this, I just wondered, are we having the conversations within local authorities joined up so that we do identify where we need to look for those? Because I think the 3,000 wasn't ambitious. I think you'll easily do 3,000, but the figures were a little bit disappointing for this meeting. But I know there's a lot of work to be done. So I'll shut up there now, but thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Sam, do you want to respond to that?
Absolutely. We're constantly working with, obviously, MEDER as well, with the new creation of that. So there's been a little bit of almost a stalemate almost as everything moves across from Welsh Government to MEDER, which has slowed some apprenticeship development up. But we are constantly working with MEDER, looking at, apprenticeship reviews, where you look at, okay, this is the apprenticeship that we've got. Does it meet employer need? Are we having the sign-ups? In terms of writing apprenticeships, that's employer-led. The National Occupational Standards need a review, which takes employers, be that public sector, private sector, whoever's best, or both, whoever's best placed, and they will feed into that National Occupational Standard review. These things take time, which is why our numbers are not they don't look good on paper, but the background work is already well underway. They then, when the qualifications are written, it follows the NOS to ensure we still meet employer need, and they are engaged throughout the process, working closely with the potential delivery partners of the universities, colleges, independent training providers. So that engagement is happening all the way along. First of all, to ensure buy-in. Second of all, apprenticeship for the point of an apprenticeship is an absolute waste of time and money for everybody who wants that. And what we found is, particularly with the new apprenticeship developments, I'll use one of ours as an example, the user experience. This was identified as a skills gap within the region, within public sector as well as private sector. When we explored further, it was a Wales-wide gap. When we explored further, it was a worldwide. It was one of the top 5 in-demand skills, and there was no apprenticeship route available anywhere. So we turned that around, in 6 months. Is why I'm dyeing my hair, because usually that process is around 2 years, from national occupational development through to qual development, through to the point where the courses are written, they're good to go, and we've got training providers ready to deliver. So within that project, we also upskilled regionally our local colleges, etc., to make sure they've got the staff that can deliver this new route. But what you find with employers, that before they commit their time, money and resource into upskilling, they want the market tested first. How is this qualification? So buy-in tends to take a couple of academic cycles before people, employers really commit. And we're starting to see that now. And we're starting to see that first development really start to pick up in terms of interest. And now that the degree is being rolled out in January, it's pricked more interest again. Because you've got that very clear, very simple 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 progression route for upskilling or for new recruits. But it's not easy, but we are getting there, and a lot of the background work has been done. So I'm hoping to see some real uptick in those figures in the next 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And I think some really good points there about this is not just even a regional picture; it's a national and international challenge on some of these schemes. And again, the apprentice one will have a bit of a lag to it for the very reasons you've laid out. And again, Francis, apologies for me not welcoming you formally to this meeting. I know I did at the other regional meeting for the other joint committee, but again, Francis O'Brien, for those who haven't met, is the new Chief Executive Officer for Neath Talbot Council. Francis, welcome to this meeting, and apologies for not welcoming you formally earlier. So looking forward to working with you in due course. Okay, we'll go to Neil next. Neil Wooding. Neil.
Great, thank you, thank you, Rob. This is the first meeting I've attended. I'm the chair of Haldar Health Board, and kind of having reviewed the papers for this meeting and previous meetings, it seems it's a really it's a critical agenda, and this item I think probably represents some of the potential for doing lots of work in the future and how we build our economy. Several thoughts. I mean, and it partly relates. Well, first of all, I think the model looks fantastic. I have to say, Samantha, it looks really comprehensive. It looks quite pragmatic, and it looks as if it's achieving or overachieving in lots of instances, and that's a great sign. I do think there's something speculative about how we train and educate and develop people, because it partly relates to the economy we want to generate in the future. So it isn't just about what do we do today, it's about what do we want our economy to look like in Swansea and West Wales in the future. And I think that's a harder question to answer, but a really important strategic question when we think about the work we do today will affect not just this generation, but the next generation as well. So, and therein I think lies the dilemma, because I kind of think we need to invest much more in digital-based apprenticeships and learning technologies, and largely we're still seeing the growth of that sector in West Wales, so it's not quite matching what we would want in terms of trying to supply a demand. The demand is not quite where we would want it to be, but I think it needs to be in the future, and I think that's part of our work. My other reflection on the apprenticeship work is that obviously within the NHS, in both Swansea and Haldar, we have quite a lot of apprenticeships. So usually in nursing, but we're looking to expand that model across other clinical professions as well as non-clinical professions. So I wonder generally what the apprenticeship picture is like across this region. Not just within the work that you're doing, but more broadly, to see if there's any lessons we can learn or any way we can collaborate into other areas to kind of draw on some of their insight or experience in terms of taking this forward, because I think it's a critical driver for us in terms of lifting skills. And but I know personally the inception period for delivering this is always quite long. Once you've got it going, it works, it reproduces itself. But for that period, it takes a long time, a lot of spade work to get this into the right place. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Neil. Absolutely agree with where you're coming from there. And I think one of the challenges for us on this item has been creating the economy of tomorrow, and then making sure that people align to that. And of course, as Sam said earlier, you have to convince the private sector that that's the direction they're heading, that the investment's worth. So it's really about getting ahead of the curve, isn't it? And there are some challenges. That Sam, I don't know whether you want to come back on the specific points.
Absolutely. We're constantly forward looking in what we do, and particularly around the barometer, and trying to align us in readiness. But then the difficulty of that is these courses are there where maybe the employer, timing is everything. And maybe the employer demand is not there yet, but you're trying to encourage them to take it up so that they're ready to take the next step. Timing is everything, and it's the biggest challenge. I could write all the courses in the world, everybody could offer to deliver them in the world, but if we haven't got the need, we haven't got the demand, then people are not going to sign up to the courses, and they're going to sit on a shelf, and in a 12 months they'll be out of date and good for nothing. So that's one of our biggest challenges, to be honest, is to make sure that we're getting the right people at the right time and steering business in the right direction. And things change so quickly, the landscape shifts, and even within skills, the PLA suddenly arrived out of nowhere during COVID, which was going to be part of our key activity, and there was no longer any need. So this constant shift, constant change in demand, and anything could happen tomorrow that would pivot it again. But this is what's amazing and an absolute nightmare with the barometer, is it's built to flex, and our business case is written to be able to flex to, the Celtic seaport, for example, and the skills needs there. Tartar workers, we could support those as well. And I know Jane has been doing a lot with the strategy board there. So that's the uniqueness, is why we're the envy of the rest of Wales of this programme, is we've got funds that can pivot and react just about overnight. Just about.
Okay, thank you, Sam.
Not over Christmas, though, please.
No, absolutely. Okay, come to Paul next. Paul Boyd. Paul?
Yeah, just a couple of comments from me, Rob. And Sam, it's very interesting to hear, the summary of all the good work that's been done. One of the things that obviously frustrates universities a little bit in Wales is the restricted number of degree apprenticeship routes that there are. And of course, we're very conscious that the Welsh Government has taken its own decisions on which areas will support, which is obviously narrower than we see in England. And we're losing students from Wales who go over the border to study apprenticeships that we don't have. So we'd obviously be very keen to continue the conversations around how can we expand some of these areas, which we feel are areas that there would be demand for, but obviously there's a bit of debate around that. My point, though, my question is, I'd just be interested to know, on the 2 centres of excellence that you've described, if there's, what thinking's gone into those and what sort of areas you're imagining they would be in.
So to address your first point first, and then I shall move on to the centres of excellence. In terms of the degree apprenticeship developments in Wales, it's been slow, and Welsh Gov had previously been seemingly very cautious. I think that's around the funding element, because obviously you don't get as many degree apprenticeships out of the pot as you would for level 3 apprentice. It's a considerable amount of financial and time investment, but we have written 1 degree apprenticeship through the Skills and Talent programme. It's digital, it's being delivered via Trinity, or it's been verified by Trinity. We're open to conversations. I think the difficulty, with Meder coming, with a little bit of a uncertainty, conversations are moving forward with them, and I'm sure they will do great work. But one of the benefits of having the Skills and Talent programme, we work closely with them, because all apprenticeships have to be signed off by Welsh Gov. We almost take the risk out for them, because we will fund the development of it, and we will fund, if needed, a test delivery period for it, so we can really drive that forward. And in terms of, this is key, meeting employer demand and us losing potentially some across the border, because they're 2 very, very different systems. We have identified a number of, our system is better, but there are weaknesses. In terms of quality, ours is better, but there are weaknesses around what Welsh Government will fund within their apprenticeship package, and we have identified a number of shortcomings whereby our apprentices upon completion maybe are not in as good a position to be able to compete with individuals from across the border. So we are looking at the moment, funding those additional certifications, sector-specific certifications that previously Welsh Government wouldn't fund, to be bolted on to our apprenticeships. So Skills and Talent will fund them separately to make sure there's a parity across the board and to really drive our apprenticeship fit for purpose, so that they literally are work ready, sector ready at the end of their apprenticeship. So we are looking at that. Centres of Excellence. So there's a couple of areas that have been identified that's happening naturally that we had in additional funding to or extra support to in order to make it into a Centre of Excellence. I'll use one as an example because it just fills my heart with joy. So energy down in Pembrokeshire, that we funded quite a bit of activity around pilot projects around energy, obviously with the Pembroke Dock Marine and the offshore energy sector there. So one of our pilots are coming to, we've just had the project closure for now. It's more than exceeded what we hope to achieve with it. And that's being rolled out. There's been interest from Cornwall, from Scotland, Morocco, Canada. The format of it and the content is so employer driven and so it hits the sweet spot. It's award winning. It's being rolled out globally. So we're hoping, so one of the Centres of Excellence we are envisaging with more activity to be energy based in Pembrokeshire. Nice Port Talbot is a natural spot as well for manufacturing and low carbon. And moving the manufacturing forward into, you know, smart manufacturing, battery storage, that kind of thing. So we are carrying out activity to support these Centres of Excellence being created, but we wouldn't claim them yet. We're not there yet, but we're working towards it. And by the time I leave, March 28, we'll be able to tick that box.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Paul, that address your points? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely fine. Thanks, Sam. Thanks for that.
No problem. Okay, John.
Thanks, Chair. And it's no surprise as well, Paul, they are aligned to our themes, our strategic themes for our region as well. So, and there are more. Sam, you mentioned the last bit you mentioned was about March 28. So you've got a change notification that's been approved by your RLSP board. Do you want to just share with the group here what the intention is or what the plan is around that?
So what the change notification is related to end of programme. So it's, we've asked for an extension of 18 months in order to continue what we're doing. Basically, it's from the same envelope around staffing costs. There's no additional cost. There'll be no less funding available in the pot to fund the projects. It's literally to move us forward where there's been some delays in construction, etc., with the other 8 City Deal projects, and therefore a delay in the knowledge of the skills needed for this new job creation. So it's just to in order us to be able to ensure we meet those needs to the best of our ability right to the very end before we leave, in a nutshell. Does that cover it off, John?
Perfectly, yes.
Okay, thank you, Sam. That was a really helpful update. And again, some really great work being done there. Look forward to having you back to the board at some point in the future, hopefully when you've got a bit more detail around those apprentices. So we will look forward to seeing you again. And if I can, early in 2025, I'd also like to probably pop in and see you like I did a while ago, just to see how the project's going on the ground. So thank you very much, Sam. Really, really interesting and some great work there. So colleagues will just note that one. Thank you, Sam, for the update. So. Really appreciate it. Have a good Christmas.
And you.
And we'll move then to item 10, which is the financial monitoring report. And I'll bring in Chris Moore to update us on this one. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, it is actually, and to members. There's 2 reports in front of you. The 110A I don't propose to go through, which is the Q1, which just was not produced in in line with the committee structure, committee meetings. So hence it couldn't go forward at the appropriate time. The timing is sometimes difficult between meetings to make sure you get to the quarter end to produce it, to submit it to the committee. But as the agendas were going out, quarter 2 became available, and I felt it was more appropriate that quarter 2 was presented, which is the updated position. So I'll, if it's acceptable, I'll take you through the quarter 2 report and ignore the quarter 1 report, because that's more up-to-date information. There are 3 parts to the report. One, the actual operational activity side of it, in terms of the PMO office and joint committee, etc. And then the other 2 parts that are down to the investment side. So parts 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the narrative refer to Appendix A, and I'll refer to Appendix A as being the summary of the position overall. If you're looking at the summary, you'll notice that the PMO office has a positive variance at the moment. It's actually underspending on what was originally part of the budget and some of the long-term sort of 5-year budget projection picture. That is mainly down to staffing. There's been 2 members of staff who left over a period of time, and they haven't been replaced, which is reducing the burden on that area, and therefore there's a £240,000 variation there. The next element, which is accountable body, is roughly consistent with what we would have expected, with the exception of the interest. And the interest is something that has been accruing in the recent times, and I've reported it previously, both last year and the year before, to a lesser degree. But this is where we're holding funds for the city deal, and also the fact that the interest on the funds has been of significant value, mainly because of the interest rates that have been paying on the market at the moment. So we've been investing these funds, and at the moment we're anticipating that there will be a value of in the region of about 3 million in terms of the interest accrued. That comes in and out of this account. You'll notice it go out further down because the principle that was adopted in the early days of the city deal was that money is distributed around the constituent authorities, and it's used as part of the funding needs for the funding of the cash flow for the city deal, bearing in mind the city deal grant is coming in over 15 years period. So that was a principle that was adopted and agreed by joint committee. So that comes in and goes out, but it is an additional resource that helps with the funding of the through the individual constituent authorities. The rest of the report then is pretty much in line with what you would have expected, with a smaller value of variation, except when you come down to the top slicing, and the top slicing element is indicating quite a significant adverse variance, and that's down to the profile of the spend of the projects, and we'll come on to the spend of the projects later. But there is a drift, as you would expect in capital projects, and as has been referred to previously. That drift means that actually we can't get some of the grant out to the constituent authorities until the expenditures have been incurred. But that means we can't top slice and fund the costs within this summary, including the PMO costs. So that has given an overall position that is more negative than we would have wished, and we got an outturn projected of a deficit on the trading activity of 518,000. That will roll up into the balances and roll forward, and it will, and I need to indicate, it will be rolling forward as a negative balance. But I don't see that a problem, because that will match against the inflows of the top slice in the future years. So the PMO office and the accountable body functions, etc., run on a timing, if you take in all the top slice into sometime in, I think it's around about March 2026, and we need to have, the joint committee needs to have a discussion on that in due course. But it's the profiling of matching the expenditure with the income, and therefore whilst it'll indicate a negative balance going forward, it'll correct itself over the next two years as the projects speed up and they draw down the rest of the grant. So I'm not concerned about it, but it does indicate the negative position and the adverse variance at the end of the year. But it's something that was expected when we were profiling originally, because we've got to try and match the profile against the receipt of the 1.5 top slicing against the profile of the grant coming in. So we are also, just by the way, waiting for the grant to come in from Welsh Government and UK Government for this year. We're in December. I have been in correspondence with the Welsh Government on that and been assured that it's in progress. So that hopefully will come in sometime early in the new year. If we go to the rest of the report then, and I'm going back then to paragraph 3 and 4. Paragraph 3 and the narrative around that identifies really where we are with the overall investment of the whole project. You will recall that when we sent the business case in originally, it was a £1.24 billion investment overall. At the moment, we're slightly up on that, indicating 1.35 billion. Got to use that figure with caution at the moment, because capital projects do vary significantly year on year. The profile varies, and where we land on each individual project could well be slightly different to what's indicated, but it's on the right side of the overall investment indication at the moment at that level. So that's a positive situation there. The following bit of the report then comes on to paragraph 3.2, which is actually just trying to profile spend in the year, and that is very difficult. And the indication is that what's reported here has actually demonstrated that, where we had anticipated expectation of spend of £257 million. And at the moment, we are below that significantly, around about £100 million. So there's been quite a drift of £156 million, mainly on 3 bigger schemes, which is Homes to Power Stations, Pentra Owl, and Sporting Innovation. As I say, the spend, when you have reports of what's actually indicated and what's happening on the ground, it's all going to happen. It's just jump in financial years. And that is something that local authorities are sort of very familiar with in terms of trying to pitch the information in one particular financial year becomes very challenging, especially on big capital projects. So again, overall is in the right place. It's just the profiling within any 1 year is the challenge, and the challenge is as much set in the profile as actually how the outcome comes. So not of concern, but information that needs to be reported. So on that basis, Chair, happy to take any questions, but that's the overall position at the moment. Diolch.
Thank you, Chris, for that explanation, and again for the reassurances in terms of the profiling. I know we're doing a piece of work at the moment to try and ensure that we get the profile as accurate as possible to delivery, and that work is underway. And obviously, in terms of what you said around the self-correction of the accounts over the period, so that again is reassuring. So any questions or comments for Chris on any of the elements of the reports?
Chair, one
Sorry.
point I should have recognised that, just for the record, is that because of the timing of the Q2 report that I've brought it direct here, this hasn't actually been presented to Programme Board. We will present it to Programme Board in the next Programme Board, but we had Programme Board a fortnight ago and it didn't actually get presented because it wasn't available. So you've had the latest information, and it's just timing that I apologise for that, but it will go to the next Programme Board when we meet in the new year. I just thought I'd better put that on record, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I understand the sequencing on that, so that's fine. Okay, if there aren't any questions or comments for Chris, could I ask colleagues to show if they're in favour of the report, please? Thank you very much. That is agreed. Thank you, Chris, for that update. Move then to the Swansea Bay quarterly portfolio monitoring. And again, you'll have received the updates from John in terms of where each of those programmes and projects are, but I'll hand over to John for any highlights he wants to direct us to.
Thanks, Chair. So if I begin with the overarching quarterly portfolio level information. So the first one is we got a red, amber, green status, a RAG status, covering scope, finance, resources, delivery, stakeholder engagement, and an overall rating. It's important to note that there's no movement on that. So campuses currently have a red status on finance and overall, and a reg in on delivery. So there's no update other than no movement. In terms of risks and issues, there is a bit of movement with them. So we still have 3 red risks, which include TAN 15, delivery of outputs and outcomes assigned to the business cases, and increase in construction costs. But 2 of the red risks have moved now into the issues log, because as opposed to there's a risk of them happening, they are now happening. So that's why the movement has happened. Those 2 are covering off what Chris has just said about in-year slippage, and then more overarching slippage in delivery of programs projects against key milestones. So we'll put mitigations and resolutions in place for all of those red risks and issues, but it's just the movement of 2 of them into the issues log because they're happening. There are some explanatory notes as well in the report. Chris just summarised in Q2 as well, if members wanted to have a look at that detail. If I move on to the benefits, so Chris covered off very neatly the investment target. So it has increased. It's now 1.35 and a little bit, 0.4 billion. But the investment within the Q1 and Q2 was around 60 million. So we spent £60 million of investment. And that was around a few key projects, including Pembroke Dock Marine, Pentre Owl, Waterfront, digital infrastructure, and homes as power stations. So again, even though there is slippage, we are still spending, tens of millions of pounds within the 2 quarters that we're looking at. And what's important to note is that with some of those, we are now seeing the private sector funding coming through. So things around digital, homes as power stations, PDM, we are starting the private sector funding to report those. There was little movement in jobs created, but again, that's quite lumpy in how we report it. So we hopefully will see more of that movement towards the end of the year. And in terms of the economic evaluations, this is about the economic impact. We're yet to report an economic impact through the Joint Committee, but we should start seeing those progress now into the new year and future years once the buildings are built and they're in operation. If I just move on to the procurement pipeline, the only thing to note is with support innovation, low carbon growth, there's 3 elements of the programme which have slipped. We've talked about this probably for some months, but now it's reported in there. We will get change notifications completed as part of that and the business case update. But Switch, the hydrogen stimulus procurement, and the advanced manufacturing production facility, those dates have moved probably by about a year or so from what we previously planned. So again, that relates to what Chris said in terms of in-year slippage. Chair, I'm not going to go through every project update, but all board members have the detail of the progress that's been made in the last quarter. There's a couple that I'll mention because I think it's worth members knowing. So support innovation, low carbon growth, the Switch project has moved on to REVA Stage 3, and that's been submitted and signed off by Leith Pataba Council and Swansea University, who are the key partners. And there is a funding gap, as we've reported in the construction gap. But again, Leith Pataba Council and partners are working to identify mitigations around that funding gap for Switch and APMF. So that's still progressing. In terms of Pentre Owl, Zone 1 and the building in Zone 1 is now badged as Canolvan. We hope to open that in spring 25. So there'll be a number of things happening in the process of that. Internal fit out will happen. Recruitment of leisure, catering, facilities management posts in coming weeks and months. But also lots of the kind of lease areas that are available. I know Swansea University has taken some of that space, but however are in the process of looking at what they're going to lease as well. So all of that is moving neatly. And we had a visit recently with Economic Strategy Board down there to talk about the project and physically see the site as well. Digital infrastructure, lots of stuff happening with that. Full fibre infrastructure build project is progressing. They've just had a milestone where they've completed 50% of their target. And the target is to create or put full fibre into at least 68 public sector assets. And that the aim of that is to transform public service delivery. So they're halfway to that. Better broadband info project, they're in the procurement preparation stages, so the final stages of that. Two areas with Carmarthenshire Council are around open access agreement for the gigabit wireless access network. So that is being signed, and the procurement for dark fibre that's currently out. So again, good movement there for digital infrastructure. Waterfront have a few updates, Chair. Kingsway, the practical completion is pretty much done. The official opening will happen early next year. The hotel are going through negotiations with heads of terms with a preferred developer. And planning application will be submitted in 2025. So again, you can see some movement on that. Innovation Matrix, which again has recently opened, they completed their practical completion in July, but they're already up to 50% occupancy for the space available, and they continue to actively market the remaining 50% of space. But we don't have any update, Chair, on the Innovation Precinct, but we're hoping that will come through in coming months. Homes as power stations, two further developments. They're both in principle have been reviewed to us to receive HAPS funding through the Financial Incentive Fund. But again, what we're starting to see now is that movement, the lag that we talked about with skills. Similar thing for the homes as power stations and other projects. We're starting to see those now move into delivery and then out the other side as to what difference that made. And finally, Chair, the Pembroke Dock Marine, that was one of the projects. MEIS is one of the projects that works in collaboration with industry and universities and various other providers. But they are starting to see private sector funding coming through. I think it was around 2.7 million from recollection. But they're also applying for funds which accumulates the city deal element, public sector, things like Innovate UK, and then private sector funding as well. So an example they had recently was in relation to Ofgem's Network Innovation Allowance. That received £1.44 million of leverage funds from £70,000 of city deal input. So what we're starting to see is a lot of that coming through the pipeline as well, Chair. So I thought I'd highlight those to give a flavour of what's in the report, but there's a lot more to unpick if people have time to read that.
Yeah, thank you, John. Really helpful update there, and again, some really good highlights in it. And I think that is a very good point to emphasise really there, which is that whilst we can focus on the financial profiling and where we are against that, the reality on the ground is there's a significant amount of delivery underway and being achieved every month because we have such a large delivery program in those 36 projects. So again, thank you for drawing our attention to some of the highlights. And I know you mentioned the digital waterfront, and actually practical completion is done, and we will be doing a handover session tomorrow with Weeks in the city centre. So again, and I know other leaders will have various items that they know are coming up in their areas as well. So yeah, thank you for that, John. And again, you can often get drawn into focusing on the did we get it absolutely on the date that we said, to the level we said, but that shouldn't mask the reality of delivery on the ground, which is what's happening. And again, I know we fed that back to the Minister yesterday in our discussions with her. So thank you, John. Any questions for John in terms of the updates on the projects there? Can't see any hands, so thank you, colleagues. I think this one's just for information, so we'll note that from Jonathan. Thank you very much. And then our final item, which is the portfolio objectives definitions. And again, back to John on this one.
Thanks, Chair. So this is for approval by board members, but we have 3 portfolio objectives. That's what we report to in part of our benefit realisation. So just to recap, it's investment, jobs created, and economic impact. Those are set out in our terms, heads of terms. And what this paper does is just define them so that we have a bit more consistency across the portfolio. This was a result of, we produced our evaluation framework earlier this year, and we had a task and finish group, and one of the feedback comments was to standardise these definitions. So this is our attempt to do that. What's important about it is through the process of developing these, we've worked with all the projects and programmes and had input and feedback from them. We've worked with both the governments to make sure that they're satisfied with the definitions as well. And this is the output of that. So I'm not going to read all the words and what it entails, but investment is, as Chris said earlier on, it's a £1.3 billion investment by 2033. Primary sources of funding are through City Deal, other public sector and private sector. And again, we have a definition within the document summarising what that is in terms of direct and indirect investment. So direct is what do we leverage and what do we use to build the building or deliver the project? And then indirect is, as a consequence of it, it could have leveraged or had return on investment around that. So again, that's defined in there. Jobs created, our target is 9,000 jobs created until 2033. What we've done is put a full-time equivalent on there and defined what that means. And the important point, I guess, is that it can include full-time and part-time, as long as we use the FTE calculation of person years. But the person has to have been employed in a role for at least 12 months. And if it's less, then we can still count it, but it would be prorated. And we would accumulate that across the portfolio. But each individual is only counted once per role. You can't have one person jumping from one role to another, or somebody in 5 years, 3 people taking on that role. We wouldn't do that. And the jobs created are, again, direct. It could be through construction, it could be through the operation of the building itself, or indirect, and that's the wider impact that it has around the building. So that again is defined. And then the third one, there was a lot of to and fro in the last couple of years around GVA, so gross value added. Because of its nature being an economic impact indicator, it's an economic indicator. What we've agreed with the government is that we can rebadge that to economic impact. And again, our target is between 1.8 and 2.4 billion up to 2033. But that is through the direct and indirect activity, again, of build, operation, and wider benefits of what we are delivering. So some projects may still choose and are able to attribute GVA to their projects, and they can continue doing that. For those who can't, would look at other indirect and direct economic impact indicators. So it could be things on spend on goods, services, wages, etc. Supply chains would be more on the indirect side of things. So, Chair, those are the 3 definitions. I've just pulled out the key salient points from what's written in each of the definitions, but they are now all in draft with projects so that they can work with those, but hopefully we'll get approval today so that can be formalised.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thanks for the work on this. It is a long way down the road for definitions, but anything that brings extra clarity so people know exactly what we're talking about when we're using these words and these statements will be helpful. So again, I think it's really important that we get these updated, and very happy to support and move that these are updated in the way that you propose in the report. Could I ask colleagues to show if they can second, please? Thank you very much. Any comments or questions for John on the definitions? No? Okay, then we'll move to the vote. If colleagues can show if they're in favour, please. Thank you all very much. Okay, so that completes our agenda for today. I've not been notified of any urgent business, so it just remains really for me to say thank you very much for your attendance, to thank you all for your cooperation, partnership and support over the last 12 months, and look forward to working with you as we head into 2025. And really just to sign off by wishing you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, Nadolig Llawen y Blwyddyn Newydd Dda, and look forward to seeing you all in the new year. Take care, folks. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks all.
Thank you all.
Good.
Happy Christmas all.